This all went down just a few weeks ago during my fall break, so the memory is still sharp and raw, like a fresh wound. I'm a sophomore in college out in California, but home is a quiet, painfully normal suburb in Delaware. I try to come home every chance I get. It's always a bittersweet trip. I love my parents, I really do, but they are traditional, with a capital T. One of their biggest hang-ups is weed. Even though it was recently legalized for recreational use in Delaware, to them, it's still the devil's lettuce. They operate under the charmingly archaic assumption that because I am under their roof, I am still their 16-year-old daughter, not a 20-year-old adult who pays her own rent out on the West Coast. So, whenever I'm home, I have to be clandestine about it. It's a ridiculous dance, but I've mastered it over the years. My dad, a retired cop, has the nose of a bloodhound, so smoking anywhere inside or even near the house is out of the question. Thankfully, I have a sanctuary, my old tree. My dad built it for me when I was 10, and it's my one truly private space on the property. It's tucked high in the branches of a sprawling maple tree in the front yard, weathered and creaky now, but still sturdy. From up there, the world is mine. I can see the whole street, the front of the house, my own bedroom window, but the dense summer leaves and twisting branches make me virtually invisible to anyone on the ground unless they know exactly where to look. It's always been my escape pod. The Saturday before I was scheduled to fly back to school, my parents were out for the evening at some formal charity banquet for my dad's old precinct. They'd be out late, but late was a nebulous term. It could be 10 p.m., or it could be 1 a.m., not wanting to risk an awkward encounter in the backyard. I grabbed my backpack with my stash and my glass bong and made the familiar climb up into the Treehouse. It was a perfect October evening, crisp and cool, the kind where you can see your breath plume in the air. The peace up there was absolute. The street was quiet, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. I settled in, packed a bowl, and watched the last sliver of the sun dip below the horizon. The nostalgia was heavy, mixed with the pleasant buzz slowly settling over me. I thought about my classes, my friends back at school, feeling that comfortable melancholy of a visit coming to an end. By the time I was done, the sky was a deep, star-dusted navy. I had timed it perfectly. That's when I saw it. A light flicked on in the living room. I froze, the bong still warm in my hand. My parents weren't home. I was the only one here. My heart gave a sudden, hard thud against my ribs. I stared at that single, illuminated rectangle of the living room window, my mind scrambling for a rational explanation. A time did they install smart lights and I didn't know, but the light wasn't the warm, yellow lamplight they preferred. It was a harsh, white, focused beam, like a powerful flashlight. My field of vision narrowed, the gentle high I'd been enjoying evaporating into a cold, sharp-edged dread. A few seconds later, movement in the backyard, visible from the side of the tree, snapped me back to reality. 3 figures, all clad in dark hoodies and pants, were moving with practiced speed and silence across our lawn. They weren't kids. They moved with an adult purpose, circling the house like predators. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I wasn't just high and paranoid. This was real. My house was being robbed. I watched, paralyzed, as the 3 figures converged on the back porch. Then, the back door opened, and a 4th figure, who had clearly been inside, let them in. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. I felt trapped, exposed, perched in a wooden box 20 feet off the ground. My first instinct was to scream, but my throat was locked tight. One of the figures didn't go inside. He remained outside, pacing the perimeter of the front yard, a sentinel. His head was on a swivel, scanning the street, the neighboring houses, the darkness. Some part of my brain took over, bypassing the frozen terror. My hand was already in my pocket, my phone in my grasp. My fingers, clumsy and trembling, unlocked the screen and opened the phone app. I dialed 911, pressing the phone so hard against my ear I could hear my own blood pounding. When the operator answered, I could only manage a choked whisper. "My house is being robbed. 1138 Elm Street. They're inside right now. Please hurry." I didn't wait for a response. I hung up, my thumb hovering over the screen. And that's when I made my mistake. As I moved to put my phone away, the bright light of the screen cut a swath through the darkness. The lookout's head whipped around, his eyes locking directly onto my position in the tree. He had seen me. There was no doubt. I ducked instinctively, flattening myself against the cold wooden floor of the treehouse, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Hey! A harsh voice cut through the night. Directly below me, there's someone up in the treehouse. I peeked through a small gap between the floorboards. The dark figure was standing at the base of the maple tree, looking straight up. He knew exactly where I was. I was trapped. He reached for the wooden planks nailed into the trunk that served as a ladder and began to climb. Panic, pure and undiluted, surged through me. I called the cops. I screamed, my voice thin and reedy. They're on their way. He didn't stop. If anything, he climbed faster, his hands and feet finding their holds with a grim determination. My eyes darted around the small space, desperate for a weapon, for anything. My gaze fell on the only substantial object within reach, my thick, heavy glass bong. Without a second thought, I grabbed it by the neck, leaned over the edge, and as he looked up, his face a pale oval in the gloom, I threw it with all my strength. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening thwack, followed by the explosive shatter of glass. He let out a choked curse and lost his grip, tumbling backward and landing in a heap on the grass below. He wasn't that high up, maybe 10 feet, but the fall and the blow were enough. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his head, and instead of trying to climb again, he sprinted back towards the house, shouting something urgent to the others inside. A moment later, all 4 figures burst out at the back of the house and vaulted the fence into the neighbor's yard, disappearing into the night. Not even 3 minutes later, the street was filled with the flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers. Shaking so badly I could barely keep my footing, I climbed down the ladder. My words were a jumbled, hysterical mess as I tried to explain what happened. I hadn't seen a car, couldn't describe any of their faces. My parents pulled into the driveway, to the site of a full-blown police investigation on their front lawn. The police told us what I already suspected. This wasn't random. The robbers must have known my parents would be out, that the house was supposed to be empty. It was a planned job. What they hadn't planned for was me, sitting in my childhood hiding spot. I'm back at school now, trying to fall back into my routine, but I can't. I haven't had a full night's sleep since it happened. Every creak of my apartment building sends a jolt of fear through me. They know what I look like. They know I was the one who called the police. And they know my parents are back in that house, all alone. The safety of that quiet suburban street is a comforting lie I can no longer tell myself. My youngest son Luke packed the last of his life into the back of our SUV last month and drove off to a college dorm 3 states away. The silence he left behind is a physical presence in the house, a heavy, suffocating quiet my wife, Christy, and I aren't used to yet. They tell you to prepare for the empty nest, but you can't. You dream of peace and quiet when they're young, but when it arrives, it's just lonely. His leaving has also unlocked a part of my memory I had consciously, and perhaps desperately, tried to keep buried for over a decade. I'm a carpenter, always have been. My hands have spent more time holding a hammer than a pen. When Luke was 8, I was in my prime, full of energy and a compulsive need to build things. My proudest creation from that era still stands in our backyard, a monument to both my skill and my naivete. The treehouse, it wasn't one of those flimsy kits. I spent 6 weekends designing and building it from scratch in the sturdy arms of a massive sycamore at the edge of our property. It had real walls, a slanted roof with asphalt shingles, and proper wooden steps with a safety railing. I wanted it to be his fortress, a safe extension of our home. Our house is the last one on a dead-end street, backing up directly onto a dense, stay-toned forest. That privacy was what sold us the place. We're not the most social people, Christy and I, and the idea of having nothing but trees behind us was idyllic. The treehouse was positioned so I could see it perfectly from our upstairs bedroom window. I couldn't see inside it. Of course, I'd built it too well for that, but I had a clear line of sight to the stairs and the entrance, a father's compromise between freedom and security. For the first year, everything was perfect. Luke loved it. He'd spend hours up there with his action figures, his older brother, Mark, occasionally joining him before officially deciding he was too cool for such things. Luke played mostly by himself after that, which seemed normal enough. That's when he started talking about Jake. At first, Christy and I thought it was sweet, an imaginary friend. We checked with the neighbors. There were no Jakes in the area. But Luke was 8. on the older side for that sort of thing. He'd never had an imaginary friend before, which struck me as odd, but Christy just smiled and said his imagination was blooming. The first red flag was Luke's insistence that Jake only existed in the treehouse. He couldn't come inside, not even for a cookie. He doesn't like roofs, Luke explained, with the dead serious logic of an 8-year-old only leaves. I did a little research online and found that it wasn't unheard of for children to compartmentalize their imaginary friends to specific locations. It was weird, but I filed it under quirky kid stuff. But then the amount of time he spent up there began to increase dramatically. He wasn't taking toys up there anymore. He would just sit, sometimes for hours, seemingly in silence. From my bedroom window, I'd see him sitting near the entrance, sometimes gesturing as if in conversation, but mostly just still. My curiosity finally boiled over one afternoon. "So, what do you and Jake talk about up there, buddy?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Luke's reaction was immediate and strange. He became defensive, his small body tensing up. "Jake's shy," he mumbled, looking at his shoes. "He doesn't like being talked about." When I pressed him on why he was spending so much time there, he said, "Jake gets lonely. He only likes to play in the treehouse." Christy was growing more uneasy. "This is getting too intense, Mike," she said one night. "It's like he's obsessed." We weren't helicopter parents, but we were starting to feel like we were losing a part of our son to this ... idea. Our rule was simple. As long as his chores were done and his grades were good, his free time was his own. Weekends were for neighborhood bike rides and games of tag that lasted until dusk called them home. That's why the Saturday he came home with a blooming black eye was such a shock. I was in the garage when he shuffled in, trying to hide the side of his face. I gently turned his chin towards the light, my stomach clenching at the sight of the dark purple and blue swelling around his eye. I cleaned him up, my mind racing through the names of the neighborhood kids, wondering which one I'd have to have a talk with. "What happened, Luke? You can tell me. I won't be mad." He looked up at me, his good eyes swimming with tears, and what he said next made the air in the garage feel instantly cold. "I got in a fight with Jake." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the statement. "Don't lie to me, Luke. That's not funny. Which one of the kids hit you?" But he just shook his head, dissolving into sobs and running to his room, slamming the door behind him. Christy was convinced he was covering for a friend. "That's it," she declared, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "Tear that thing down now." I couldn't do it. The thought of destroying weeks of my own hard work, my gift to him, felt like a failure. I promised her I'd get to the bottom of it. The next day, while Luke was sullenly watching cartoons, I decided to investigate the treehouse myself. I hadn't been up there in months. The moment my head cleared the trapdoor in the floor, a foul, musty odor hit me. It was the smell of damp earth and something else, something vaguely rotten. What I saw made my stomach churn. Scattered across the floor were children's socks and a pair of worn-out sneakers, caked in mud and grime. They weren't Luke's. They were too small, and I knew for a fact we'd donated all his old shoes. There were also food wrappers, granola bars, chip bags, and 2 of our ceramic plates from the kitchen, smeared with the remnants of old food. But the worst part was the walls. They were covered in drawings, crudely rendered in what looked like charcoal or pencil. They were all animals from the surrounding woods: a fox with unnervingly human-like eyes, a skeletal-looking deer, a bear. The one that made me feel physically ill was a drawing of a gigantic spider. It was anatomically incorrect but viscerally terrifying, with too many legs, and where its head should have been, the artist had furiously scribbled it out, leaving a dark, violent vortex of graphite. It felt like I was looking at something truly insane. I climbed down, my hands shaking, and confronted Luke. His explanation was delivered with a chilling calmness. "Jake only likes to talk on a full stomach," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The shoes, he's forgetful. He leaves things." That was the final straw. I forbade him from ever going into the treehouse again. I was certain he was lying, that he'd somehow gotten in with a troubled kid from another neighborhood, and was concocting this elaborate fantasy to cover it up. Christy and I seriously discussed finding a child psychologist. A few evenings later, the truth, or at least a piece of it, revealed itself. I was in our bedroom, looking out at the yard as dusk bled into night. A flicker of movement by the sycamore tree caught my eye. My first thought was anger. Luke was disobeying me, but as my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I realized it wasn't Luke. It was a child, yes, but this one was wrong. It was a sickly, frail-looking boy, no older than Luke, with pale skin that seemed almost luminous in the twilight. His clothes were ragged and dark. He was climbing down the treehouse steps, but he moved with an unnerving, jerky fluidity, like a stop-motion puppet. He didn't look like any kid from our town. A primal fear shot through me. "Hey!" I yelled, throwing open the back door and running out onto the lawn. "Stop right there." The moment my voice cut through the air, the boy's head snapped in my direction. He didn't pause. He didn't hesitate. He dropped the last few feet to the ground, landed in a crouch, and darted into the woods. With a speed that was nothing short of freakish, he didn't run like a boy. He moved like a panicked animal, weaving through the trees and disappearing into the darkness in seconds. The police came. Christy called every parent in the neighborhood, though their children were home and accounted for. There were no missing children reports in the county. The officers searched the woods with flashlights and found nothing. With our consent, a gentle-voiced officer sat with Luke and asked him about his friend. What Luke told him was horrifying. He said Jake was a magic boy who lived in the woods with his animal friends. He said Jake would beg him to come live with them, to leave us behind. When Luke refused, Jake would get angry and make strange noises, like chittering or hissing. The black eye. Jake had pushed him from the top step of the treehouse ladder for refusing to steal Christie's jewelry for him. The police conducted a full-grid search of the woods over the next 2 days and found no signs of a camp. No runaway, nothing. We never saw Jake again. Christy, who has always been more superstitious than I am, believes Jake was never a real boy. She thinks he was a fae creature, a changeling, something ancient from the woods, trying to lure our son away. I'm a man of sawdust and levels. I don't believe in things like that. But standing here now, in this quiet house, looking out at the dark tree line where that thing vanished, I honestly don't know which explanation is more terrifying. The thought that a paranormal entity was trying to steal my son, or the thought that deep in those woods there are feral people, living like animals, watching and waiting. When I was 9, my dad landed a job that felt like winning the lottery. It was a senior engineering position at a biomedical firm, a title that meant nothing to me at the time other than its one life-altering consequence. We had to move. We left behind our cramped, perpetually damp rental in a forgotten corner of Pennsylvania and were catapulted into the manicured world of Brookmont, Maryland. My parents used the word forced, but their eyes gleamed with an excitement I hadn't seen before. The decision was made in a whirlwind. One month, I was sharing a room with my older brother Sean, with peeling paint on the walls. The next, I was standing in the foyer of a house so large I was afraid I'd get lost in it. The house was a sprawling colonial, set back from the road on a generous 2-acre lot. My older brothers, Sean, 17, and Harold, 15, immediately claimed the entire finished basement as their domain, leaving me with a bedroom on the second floor that was bigger than our old living room. I was a quiet, solitary kid by nature, more comfortable with books and action figures than with neighborhood kids, so I didn't mourn the loss of any deep friendships. In truth, I didn't have any. Move for me was less a social upheaval and more a change in scenery. And what a scene it was. The backyard was a universe unto itself. A vast, manicured lawn gave way to a thick stand of ancient oak and maple trees that formed a natural property line. Woven through the lawn was an intricate hedge maze, perfect for the games of hide-and-seek. My brothers occasionally deigned to play with me, but the crown jewel, the undeniable centerpiece of my new world, was the treehouse. It was nestled deep within the patch of trees separating our property from the neighbors. To call it a treehouse feels like a gross understatement. It was a fortress, a wooden castle in the canopy. The previous owner, my dad explained, was a wealthy eccentric who had it professionally built for his grandchildren. It wasn't some weekend project cobbled together with spare lumber. This thing was an architectural marvel, spanning the thick branches of 6 interconnected oak trees. A solid, wide staircase with a real handrail spiraled up the trunk of the largest tree, leading to the first of 3 distinct levels. It had actual framed windows with glass panes, a shingled roof, and a small balcony on the top level that offered a commanding view of the entire neighborhood. For the first few months, that treehouse was our shared kingdom. Sean, Harold, and I spent every waking hour after school up there, plotting imaginary wars, telling ghost stories, and daring each other to climb onto the roof. It was the heart of our new life. But teenage apathy is a relentless tide. Soon, Sean found a girlfriend and a driver's license, and Harold discovered girls in the high school weight room. The treehouse was no longer cool. It became lame for kids. Their abandonment was gradual at first, then absolute. I tried to lure them back, promising new games, even offering to do their chores, but it was no use. The kingdom had been abdicated, and I was its sole, lonely ruler. The loneliness was a heavy blanket in the quiet of the treehouse. The silence, once filled with their laughter and insults, was now just empty. It was during this period of solitary reign that I found the first note. It was a single, folded piece of lined paper, tucked neatly into the frame of the main window. The handwriting was a childish, blocky scrawl. It read, "Hello, I'm the Marshmallow Man. I tease, nice to meet you. What's your name?" A jolt of pure, unadulterated joy shot through me. It had to be them. It was a game. A new, secret game designed to pull me back into their orbit. They were trying to make the treehouse fun again. My heart swelled with gratitude. I scanned the room and noticed a fresh stack of paper and a few markers sitting on a small built-in shelf, things that definitely hadn't been there before. Proof. They were playing along. I grabbed a red marker and, in my best 9-year-old cursive, wrote back, "My name is Leo. I'm glad you're here." I carefully folded the note and placed it exactly where I'd found the first one, my mind buzzing with excitement for their next move. That night at dinner, I almost burst with the secret. I watched Sean and Harold, looking for a smirk, a wink, any sign that they were the masterminds behind the Marshmallow Man. But they were engrossed in their own worlds, talking about homework and weekend plans. I decided to keep quiet, afraid that acknowledging the game would break the spell. The next day, I bolted from the school bus, my backpack thumping against my spine as I ran to the treehouse. Sure enough, a new note was waiting. "Leo is a good name. I like it." The game continued like this for days. I'd rush home, find a note, and eagerly write a reply. The early messages were innocent, fun. "What's your favorite color? Do you like superheroes?" They felt exactly like questions my brothers would ask, simplistic and playful. I was having the time of my life. But then, the tone began to shift, subtly at first. Then, with a creeping unease that pricked at the edges of my 9-year-old consciousness, the questions became more specific. "What time does your dad get home from work?" I answered it, thinking it was part of the game. Maybe the Marshmallow Man was a spy. "What do you eat for breakfast on Saturdays?" A weird question, but still within the realm of possibility. I wrote back, "Pancakes." The questions grew progressively more personal and unsettling. "Do your parents lock the doors at night? Which window in the house is your bedroom?" That last one sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. I hesitated for a full day before answering, drawing a clumsy map on the back of the paper, marking my window with an X. I told myself it was still Sean and Harold, that this was just part of a more elaborate, spooky game. I was desperate to believe it. The note that shattered the illusion was the one I found on a cold Friday afternoon. The handwriting seemed sloppier, more urgent. It asked, "What do your pajamas smell like after you sleep in them?" The words hit me like a physical blow. A hot, sick feeling churned in my stomach. This wasn't funny. This wasn't a game. This was disgusting. I grabbed the note, my hand trembling, and stormed into the house. I found Sean and Harold in the basement, playing video games. I threw the crumpled paper at them, my voice cracking as I screamed, "Which one of you is it? It's not funny anymore." They looked at the note, then at each other, and then they erupted in laughter. Not playful laughter, but mocking, dismissive laughter. "The Marshmallow Man," Harold wheezed, clutching his stomach. "Dude, are you serious? We haven't been in that stupid treehouse in months." They swore up and down they had no idea what I was talking about, making fun of me for having an imaginary friend. Humiliation and anger washed over me, followed by a wave of cold, terrifying fear. If it wasn't them, who was it? I didn't go to my parents. I was too embarrassed, and some part of me was convinced my brothers were just committing to the lie. I decided to catch them. That night, I lay in bed, my body rigid with a mixture of fear and determination. The house settled into its usual nighttime symphony of groans and creaks. Then, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping at my bedroom window. I froze, my blood turning to ice. My room was on the second floor. There was nothing outside that window but a sheer drop to the lawn below. I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling the covers over my head, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I told myself it was a branch, the wind, anything but what I feared it was. Eventually, through sheer emotional exhaustion, I fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning my limbs felt heavy as I forced myself out of bed. I crept to the window, my breath held tight in my chest, and pulled back the curtains. A gasp escaped, my lips, taped to the outside of the glass, arranged in a grotesque smiley face, were dozens of stale, sticky marshmallows. Pure rage eclipsed my fear. It had to be them. This was a cruel, elaborate prank, and I was going to expose it. I spent the entire day in a silent fury, pretending I hadn't seen the marshmallows, not saying a word to my brothers. I was setting a trap. That night, I didn't get into bed. I hid in my closet, leaving the door cracked just enough to see the window. I waited. Hours passed. The house fell silent. Just as I was about to give up, the tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. I leaped from the closet and flung the curtains open, a furious yell already forming in my throat. But the yell died in my lungs, replaced by a choked, silent scream. It wasn't my brothers. Pressed against the glass, leering in at me, was a man. His face was a pale, doughy horror. His eyes were a jaundiced, predatory yellow, and when his lips peeled back in a smile, I saw a nightmare of broken, rotting teeth. Thin, patchy wisps of greasy hair were plastered to his scalp. He was old, filthy, and he was right there. He raised a hand, a marshmallow pinched between his grimy fingers, and tapped it against the glass again, his smile widening. I don't remember the scream, but my parents said it was the most terrifying sound they'd ever heard. I just remember the feeling of my world collapsing, the certainty that this monster was going to break through the glass and get me. My dad burst into the room just as I collapsed, and when he looked at the window, the man was gone. The aftermath was chaos. Police swarmed our property, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They searched every inch of the yard, the hedge maze, and the treehouse. They found the stack of paper and the markers. They took my collection of notes as evidence. They scoured the neighborhood, but it was as if the man had dissolved into the night air. He was never found. My parents, horrified, tore the treehouse down the next weekend. Board by board, they dismantled my castle, my kingdom, until nothing was left but the scars on the old oak trees. I moved out of that house years ago, but my parents still live there. Whenever I visit, my eyes are inevitably drawn to that patch of trees, to the empty space where the treehouse once stood, and sometimes, on a quiet night, I swear I can still feel the faint, sickly sweet smell of marshmallows on the air.